practice and application component offers the opportunities to reinforce the language and content goals of the lesson. By using hands-on materials and physical movement, students can practice new material in ways that require less language. The next feature points out that teachers must include activities allowing students to apply the new language and content knowledge. The final practice and application feature reminds teachers to include activities that incorporate all 4 language skills: reading, writing, listening, and speaking.
Here we join Hope Phillips as she discusses her 8th grade physical science lesson from a unit theme of Newton's first law of motion. Her class is comprised of 25 English learners and 3 native English speakers.
Today in my lesson I used a lot of hands-on materials. We were doing a science experiment, and so we were using baking soda, vinegar, beakers, and raisins, and also water. And I chose them because we are working on Newton's laws and forces, and I wanted to do some kind of fun, engaging activity that would help them be able to look at Newton's laws and forces.
Okay, so our goals for today are that the students will demonstrate application of scientific observations by recording observations about raisins in the beaker. Our language objectives for today are that you're going to make observations about the experiment and you're going to use vocabulary words. And you'll be using the sentence starter, "One observation I made was blank." And your last goal for today, your last language goal, is that you're going to use the words gravity, buoyant force, rest, motion, and force to explain what happens in the beaker during the experiments. When I call on you, I'd like you to share one observation that you made yesterday with the class. And our first lucky winner is Eduardo.
One observation I made was that people were falling because it was hard to stop.
Okay, one observation that Eduardo made was that people were falling because it was really hard to stop. Now I'm going to take 2 explanations using Newton's law because we're going to be focusing on that again today. So, what is one explanation that you had yesterday? Alan.
When we were in motion, it was hard to stop. When we were at rest, we used friction to stop moving. The unbalanced force was us.
Okay, the unbalanced force was us. Excellent observation, Alan. You used all 3 of the different components of Newton's law.
Today I wanted the students to be able to make observations about something, and I also wanted them to be able to apply their background knowledge that they have about forces and Newton's laws. So I tried to find an experiment that would be interesting to them, where they could make observations and then also use the vocabulary and the background information that we have to explain what they saw happening.
Okay, before we start, I also want to just review with you. Today, when we're thinking about force in our experiment today, I want you to be thinking about gravity, which we've talked about over the last couple weeks, and also the buoyant force. And your explanations later today, you're going to be using the words gravity and buoyant force. And of course, you're also going to be using Newton's first law of motion. So now I'm going to hand out to you the directions for our raisin experiment today. I'm going to hand it out to you, and you guys are going to read it, and then I'm going to call on some volunteers to help explain the activity to us. Sergio, what is the first step for the experiment?
Put 100 milliliters of water in your beaker.
Yes, we're going to put 100 milliliters of water into our beaker, and we used the beakers yesterday, so we're going to be using the same size beaker that you used yesterday. And our first step is going to be to put 100 milliliters of water, or H2O, into our beaker. And lucky for you guys, I have the beakers for you already, and they already have the water in it, so you don't even have to do that step. Okay, I would like you guys to tell your partners step 2 and step 3. Horacio, what's step 2?
Add 1 spoonful of baking soda to a beaker.
Yep, okay, so we're going to be using baking soda today, and you guys have all seen baking soda before, but I actually have it in little cups for you today just to make it easier to get it at your table. So you're going to add 1 spoonful of baking soda into the beaker. So you'll have water in your beaker, and you're just going to take 1 spoonful and put it in the beaker. And step 3, can I have a volunteer? Ashley?
Add 5 raisins to a beaker.
Okay, step 3 is an interesting one. We're going to also be adding raisins into our beaker. So you're going to have 5 raisins, and you're actually just going to drop them into the beaker. So we're gonna add 5 raisins. TJ, what's the next step? Step 4.
Add 15 milliliter vinegar to your beeper.
Yep, you're gonna add 15 milliliters of vinegar, and again, you guys have all used vinegar before, and I have it all ready for you in these graduated cylinders. So the next thing that you'll do is add the 15 milliliters of vinegar into your beaker. You're gonna just pour it in there. Okay, and I'm actually just gonna go through the next few steps. So, step 5 is that you're gonna record your observations for about 2 to 3 minutes. What do you notice happening? What do you see happening? When we did the experiment today, the students were using all of the different language skills. First of all, they had to read the experiment that they were doing. Then they had to share with a partner, so there they were speaking and listening. And then finally, they had to write down observations and write their explanations. Is anyone willing to share one of your observations? Jessica?
One observation is that the raisins went to the bottom and had bubbles.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and write Jessica's down. After about 2 to 3 minutes, you're actually going to add another 15 milliliters of vinegar. And you're going to record your observations for 2 or 3 more minutes. What did you notice, Alan?
I put in the vinegar, and then the bubbles were pushing this one up and down and up and down.
Okay, so they're pushing the raisin up and down. What force is possibly bringing the raisin up to the top?
Buoyant force.
The buoyant force. What force is bringing the raisin back down?
Gravity.
Makes it go up, and then gravity maybe perhaps is the one that pushes it down, and that gravity pushes it down, and perhaps buoyant force is the one that's trying to push it up. So it could be an unbalanced force.
Well, it was probably the reaction. Some of the activities that I like to use to integrate all of the language skills are using sentence starters for the students and letting them write it on a post-it note. The students really think post-it notes are fun. Okay, and as I'm handing out your post-it notes, I'd like you guys to start thinking about how does this experiment apply to Newton's law? How can you use Newton's law of motion, Newton's first law of motion, to explain what's happening in your beaker? We're gonna do our first language objective, and on your post-it note, I want you to use your sentence starter. One observation I made was blank. When I use the post-it notes and sentence starters with the students, they are using all of their language skills. They're writing a sentence on the post-it note, and then they read it to a partner, so they're reading and speaking, and they have to then listen to their partner read their sentence to them.
What I made was that once we put the vinegar, the raisins went up.
One observation I made was the water is no longer clear and looks dirty and getting yellow.
In about 1 minute, I'm going to have you guys share your observations, and I want you to, if I call on you, you're going to bring them up and put them on our poster. Vanessa.
One observation I made was that when you added the vinegar, the raisins went up and down.
Okay, when you added the vinegar, the raisins went up and down. Great job. The next part is I want you to use Newton's first law of motion to describe what you saw in the beaker. So just like we did yesterday with our mini experiments, just remember an object at rest stays at rest, and an object in motion stays in motion unless a force acts on it. So using the words rest, motion, unbalanced force, I want you to explain what you saw happening in the beaker. The raisin was at rest when we didn't have the vinegar, and the raisins were in motion because the bubbles were pushing up. Great job. I have seen a lot of changes in my students because of the SIOP model. Mostly I notice that they're comfortable in my classroom. They feel comfortable to share and to participate. I've seen them grow in their language levels, and I really believe that that's because they are able to use the language every day in class.